Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of I Can't Know Music, I'll Know Music. This is episode 10, and my name is Michael Nipp, and I'm here as always with my co host, Blake.
Hey, how's it going, Internet?
We are covering, just a description of the show, real quick, is we listen to an album for a week, and then we talk about said album in a little more detail. We go track by track and kind of to go over our thoughts. This week, we are talking about Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. Just for some context, this is coming after one of our favorite episodes so far, being Pink Floyd's album, The Wall. And so we thought we'd give this one a try, since this is the one that I think kind of is a lot more mainstream, a lot more people either like or know about, or I don't know. The artwork on this one's really cool, so a lot of people have t-shirts and stuff of this one. So we thought we'd give this one a shot.
It was also fairly critically acclaimed. It was on, I think, Billboard for almost 14 years after its release. So
741 weeks, I think, is what it said.
Yeah, a fair bit of time for, an album.
Yeah, so that's crazy. So we've been listening to that for a week. We're going to go ahead and talk about our thoughts on the album. So here's the thing that's confusing me, and I have to admit, maybe I'm just too dense for this. People always describe it as a concept album, but it doesn't fit my normal definition of a concept album.
Yeah. In the documentary, I watched it today and sent it to you. It was more about like the sound engineering kind of side of it, which, I mean, like, I don't know any music. I tried playing the trumpet a couple years ago and was really, really bad at it because I can't keep time at all. But like, I didn't know what they were talking about most of the time, but it was kind of really cool to see what their process was behind making the album and stuff. I think from what they were saying, it seemed like this was the concept of a concept album was either very, very new at the time, or like they were the first ones. So this is kind of early in that genre, I guess you would say. It's not a genre, but it's category.
Yeah. Method of doing stuff, because normally a concept album is generally a story that's being told, in which case I guess that this one kind of is more of a musical story and less of like a character arc.
Yeah, or a, not a story, but literally a focus on a concept rather than an overarching theme per se.
Yeah, well, it's more like, it's almost like a true theme album versus, or I mean, I guess the definition of true of a concept album, whereas most of the time now you think of a concept album as being a story and a theme album as being about a specific theme. It kind of actually is the truest concept album in that it is more of a theme album. But man, I think one of the things worth mentioning on this album is that it came out in 1973, if I'm correct.
I believe so. Yeah.
1973, and man, does it actually hold up really well. Like, so much of the styles of this album are so forward facing that it had to have been revolutionary at the time. Like, this is an album that you can listen to a lot of modern music and be like, oh yeah, this was kind of where this kind of eventually led to. Like, this was obviously super influential. Like, it has, like, it's not just like rock and roll guitars. Like, you've got horns, you've got synthesizers, and like, I watched a brief section of the documentary that you were able to send me about the making of this album. Like, this was one of the very first things to ever use a sequencer, which is kind of now a ridiculously common thing in songs. I think it was very early on in the synthesizer kind of era. Like, they're experimenting with all sorts of effects and feels. And if you haven't heard this album yet, I highly recommend it. But I suggest that the best way that you could possibly listen to this album is either with really nice speakers in a dark room or headphones with just like a couple candles lit. Just like turn everything else off and just like chill. Like it is meant to be experienced in the way that a lot of, I think, more artistic albums are meant to be experienced, which is at one continuous time period, with one like flow of mindful, like it's one of those where every track flows into the next track. It's meant to be experienced as a story of its own.
Yeah, it makes it, if you have the opportunity to try not to listen to it on Spotify, especially if you don't have premium, because like the ads will pop up and it'll kind of bring you out of the album, which I was listening to it today and that kept happening, and yeah, it kind of
This
sucked.
is an album I would love to listen to on vinyl.
Yeah,
like you're forced to listen to the entire thing in one go, and you can, well, I guess you have to flip it, right? I guess this would be two sides. Either way, in two goes.
I guess. I don't know how records work.
I'm pretty sure that half the songs
whole
are
album
on
one side of a record.
I don't think so.
This is,
well, hold on.
This is technically a shorter album.
Yeah, I'm googling. I can't know music. I'll know music instead of Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd The Wall album Wikipedia. I'm almost positive that it's too long. Oh, I clicked on The Wall instead. Is The Wall on 2 vinyls or?
The Wall is on 2 vinyls, but it's a lot longer. Yeah. The version that's on Spotify of Dark Side of the Moon, it's separated into 2 discs, but the first disc is the actual like music, and then the second disc is all the music live.
Yeah. Also, like, the Dark Side of the Moon, blah blah blah. I can't remember. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We don't have, neither of us have record players, but oh yeah, here we go. It is 2-sided.
Okay.
It splits at The Great Gig in the Sky and Money.
Okay.
Now here's going to show my ignorance. Do they make record players that automatically flip over? Like obviously there's a delay. I would assume so, right?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that most of them
either way
actually flip them over. Unless it's like,
I think this would be fun.
No, jukeboxes don't even flip records. They play singles, don't they?
Yeah, well, they're record singles, and I think they just pick them up and then put it back. So I don't think they flip them. Anyway, our lack of knowledge about vinyl listening aside, I think it would be awesome to listen to like on the warm sound of a record player with some speakers, lights out. Like it is a really cool kind of journey to listen to one end of this album to the next, and I do recommend it highly. So I guess right off the bat, we're saying it's great. You should listen to it. At least I am. Do you want to start? Let's see. The first song is called "Speak to Me." So I guess we can start talking about like it. The song starts off with "Heartbeat." Heartbeat beats. Which so what is your take on the album and the theme of the album? Because I have not fully formed mine, but it looked like your notes had a better grasp on this.
So kind of what I've pieced together is that this album is kind of about all of life and how like all these different areas and different scenarios or situations have essentially like a good side and a bad side, and it's this constant battle between light and dark, the sun and the moon, good and evil, which we see in like all these songs, and then at the end in the track Eclipse, it kind of ties all this together, which I won't talk too much about, just so that we can talk about that when that happens. But yeah, just this kind of.
It seems like one of the large themes of the album is also insanity on some level.
Mhm.
Like there's a lot of crazy person laughing, and then later on, one of the last songs also talks about insanity more specifically, which I guess it looks like the consensus is that a lot of the insanity stuff is based on a member of the band that got kicked out for kind of going crazy and like
Mhm.
he was addicted to LSD and was a crazy person, but also like like creative and talented. His name was Sid Barrett, and he left before
This
he
is their first album without him, if
is it okay?
I'm thinking correct, or at least as Pink Floyd the band. They also apparently did a whole bunch of like soundtrack stuff.
Okay.
They talked about that a bit in the documentary. Speaking of, did you hear? I assume you probably might have about the Wizard of Oz like overtrack. How
Okay, so
people speculated how this
I
album is supposed to be a soundtrack that you play over the Wizard of Oz.
So yeah, I was gonna bring that up too. There's a Wizard of Oz thing that basically you're supposed to start this album on repeat when the lion, I think, is roaring as the start of the Wizard of Oz happens. And evidently this is supposed to actually work really well with the movie The Wizard of Oz. Were you able to do that?
Um, you can look it up on YouTube, and they have like, you know, people have already put it on. I don't think it does. Like, there are a few parts that match up. Like, I can't remember what song it is, but it talks about like balancing on some wave, and it's right as Dorothy is balancing in between, like on the fence when she falls into the pig pen or something. And then there are like one or two other
Nice.
parts, but like I didn't listen through like all the way, so I could be wrong. But I also did. I read the Wikipedia article on it, and apparently like the sound engineer like had no idea, or he's like, no, this we didn't take any account into this. Pink Floyd has done soundtracking before, and they know how to do it, and that's not how they approach this album, like musically.
Yeah, it
And then
wasn't intended that way, but a lot of people still seem to like stick by that it works really well. Like obviously the album is going to loop like 4 times
yeah,
by the time
the
because it's
album
a
is like
longer movie.
45 minutes long, and the movie is like an hour and a half. But yeah, and then also some of the band members said that we had no intention of doing this. One actually said, yeah, if you turn off all the sound on any movie and play a soundtrack, you can kind of see that it works well together. So I don't know.
Yeah, I've
I'm on the
also
side
found that like, go ahead.
I'm on the side that would say that this album is not in any way really related to that movie.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I just think it sounds like a really weird kind of fun thing to experiment with. Also, like to that point that you just mentioned, like if you are reading a book that you have read before, try reading it while you have an album playing, then switch to a different album and read the same parts, and every single like it makes books really weird how much they can feel like the same passage can feel so different if you're listening to different music when you're reading. So like yeah, that kind of fits. You could just change a movie, play a different album, and it could like totally have a different like effect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh yeah, so that'll speak to me. There's not very many lyrics. It starts off with a heartbeat, then clock sounds, which I think fits along with the idea of it being about life. And time, and then I'd say it also goes for the insanity because there's the line. There's a guy that eventually starts talking, and he says a bunch of stuff, including "I've always been mad. I know I've been mad, like the most of us. Very hard to explain why you're mad, even if you're not mad." And like, there's also like weird, crazy person laughing.
Yeah, it's just kind of a transition into the first song, which is generally how they're played. They're played together. In fact,
Yeah, Go ahead.
on that cover album, I found a reggae Dark Side of the Moon cover album that I checked out as well this week. They have these two tracks together. So a lot
I really
of people
want to listen to that one now. What's the title of it, just for the show?
Dub Side of the Moon. It's pretty good.
That sounds like something I want to listen to. I haven't got a chance yet. The next song is called Breathe, parentheses, in the air, close parentheses. Which starts off with a lot of instrumental. Actually, a lot of this album is instrumental. Evidently, that was kind of one of the things that Pink Floyd did a lot of in the early stuff. It's when we listened to The Wall, it had a lot of instrumental sections, but I think that this was back when that was kind of their thing. They mentioned that on the documentary, that they did a lot of just like jamming out, and that also makes sense, especially if you mentioned that they did a lot of soundtracking. That's the kind of thing they would be doing anyway. So like there's a minute 30 or a minute 20 or something before they even start singing, and then the way that I interpret the song is it's about kind of living life a little bit like a competition and having to try to balance everything and not really enjoying life for what it is, always trying to get more out of it than what you maybe should.
Mm-hmm.
What was your take on this song?
So pretty much what I took was life is this kind of almost list of commands where, as soon as you're born, you're being told, breathe. And then from there, it just adds on to, do what you're told through your schooling and your adolescence. And then as you become an adult, do your work. He relates his work with the albums I believe that he relates his work with the Pink Floyd albums and other music in this line section where he talks about a rabbit digging a hole, and as soon as he's done digging the hole, it's time to dig another one. And it's just this kind of monotonous, not existential, but like kind of life is meaningless.
Philosophical view. Which I think flows very well into the next song, which is called On the Run. I mentioned previously on this podcast that there's what's the word? Sequencing. There's some of the early like sequencing and synthesizer effect on this album, and On the Run just starts off with like a really fast 4-note sequenced kind of like fast pace, urgent sounding synth pad, and like it's got more of the crazy laughing. There's not a lot of words in this one also. But the person says, "Live for today, gone tomorrow." That's me, and then like more crazy laughing, which kind of fits along with the like rushing through life, without a lot of deeper meaning, like you mentioned on the last song. The synth pad just kind of slowly turns into what I kind of interpret as like kind of slow crashing waves at the end of that track. Which I think, previously there was a lyric about riding the tide and balancing on the biggest wave in the song before that. Anything else on that song, On the Run?
As you were saying about the synth pad and stuff, what I found interesting in the documentary, they were talking about this song and how they had to do it, and how they mixed it. And they literally had like the producer and like all of the band members standing on this mixing board, because it was back before computers and you couldn't just you actually had to do everything manually and record a master of what you're real-time mixing, and how they were running out of channels, so they had to like play something and then immediately shut it off, switch the channel in time for them to be ready to play the next thing. And they were using like the entire board, which I think is a pretty cool, like, it's not done that way anymore. And I think that
No, that's
the
crazy.
art of mixing is, especially back then, took a whole lot of talent.
I think that like that is something that we easily take for granted now, is that when you listen to this album and you hear that there's like 12 sounds going on at one time, you're like, oh, all tracks have 12 songs going on at one time. Like the average pop song that's, you know, whatever, bubblegum pop, popcorn. What is it? What is the term that you used last week?
I called it candy pop, but it's bubblegum pop,
yeah.
is the actual thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that, of course, all of that stuff has that much stuff now, but you mentioned, yeah, back then they didn't have ways to get that many sounds into the same track very easily, so they had to do crazy stuff like that. And like the idea of a synth was still new. The idea of like all of these sounds mixing together, like all the sounds mixing together that we take for granted now, like were completely new concepts back then, or at least relatively new concepts back then, to the point that like there are tracks on this album that I think would fit like really, really well into like Daft Punk's Random Access Memories, and you may not, like, if you remastered it, you wouldn't even know that it didn't belong on that album. And like it's so weird how well that stuff fits into the modern timeline of pop music, with some of the stuff coming back, but like back then that was revolutionary. What do you got for the next song, Time?
All right, so this one is, I think this one is probably my favorite song on the album.
Okay.
This one is kind of about how we as people kind of deal with time, and how we often let it, in our youth, we kind of waste it, and then as we grow older, we tend to value it more and chase after it and try to hold on to it. In the documentary and some interpretations I found, it talked about how Walters, the writer, he kind of felt like at this point in his life, there was this kind of blurred line between adolescence, where he's being kind of taught how to live life, and being prepared to start living life, and adulthood that he kind of missed, which he talks about in the line. It says, "No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun, and you run to catch up with the sun, but it's sinking." And he's talking kind of like, I think he was about 29 or something at the time when he wrote this song, about how the realization of how valuable time is and how little of it we have, kind of with this this meaningless view of life, and how it's just kind of this monotonous repetition of commands and tasks that we do, but we still we go after our time, and later on we talk about money and other things in our life.
Yeah, like I think it does a really, really good portrayal of something that everything, like every first world problem, or every first world person goes through the problem of, when you're young, you just want everything to be fun all the time, and like you're constantly bored, and then eventually someday you wake up and you're an adult, and all that time that you had that you didn't realize you had is wasted, and you know, the older you get, the less time you have left. I wrote a bunch of notes on this album that were less about the specific lyrics, and like tons describing the kind of musical things that are happening, because there's a lot of musical things happening in these albums. Like for my notes on here, I wrote like clocks ticking again, alarms, everything is ringing, more ticking as the alarm bells end than the drum the drum beat kicks in and it's like a heartbeat again. Kick in synth and bass, light guitars tones that resemble a bell to like a chime, bongo sounding drums, and it all creates this like mysterious atmosphere that's like really like because the tick clocks and everything.
Mhm.
And then as the lyrics start, it goes back, it goes into a little bit more of like a normal rock song on this guy, but it's like there's a lot going on musically in a way that I think like having seen a couple of different like Broadway productions or like stage theater shows, like this is like a soundtrack in that way where it's got this build up. There's like a second act and then a third act, and it all flows so well. Sometimes from song to song, and then sometimes from a couple songs in a row, like all flowing as one piece.
Yeah, they definitely bring like an artistic, theatrical view to their music and their approach with how they tie their tracks together, and they interlude back and forth between tracks previous tracks and stuff like that. You see them come back to, I think it was either Breathe or Speak to Me a couple times throughout the album, as well as a couple other tracks. But yeah, they definitely have a very raw artistic approach to their music.
I think between listening to My Chemical Romance's The Black Parade a couple weeks ago and stuff like this or The Wall, I think I realized that I just really, really like it when rock music gets into like theater type sounds and feels. Because like it's way cool. Like maybe that's just me looking for like a rock opera to be like my favorite thing ever. But like that is a really cool thing when you got the theatrical like big buildups and like flows and arcs with guitars, and like this album actually has so many like guitars are the least of the most awesome things on this album.
And like seeing this show live would be like so cool because they have like these awesome like light shows that are going on all the time, and like it's all psychedelic and crazy.
Yeah, that would be super cool, but unfortunately these people are kind of old now, and I don't know how well it would. I mean, I'm sure they can still play, so maybe it's a thing that could happen.
They actually show most of them playing in that documentary, just like replaying all the songs and like kind of remixing them and stuff like that. It's really cool. They isolate different parts of the track just to show how they sound like pre-mix, and they sound like really, really different, but it's so cool when it all comes together. With all the effects that they add to them and stuff like that.
Yeah. I need to finish. I watched about 15 or 20 minutes of it before I had to podcast and then eventually make this show. But yeah, I do plan on finishing it. The next song is called The Great Gig in the Sky, which I'm pretty sure this is a shorter song. Well, not shorter, I guess. It's 4 minutes and 43 seconds.
Yeah, this one is more... Is this one of the more instrumental ones?
Yeah, yes. It is like a piano ballad.
Yeah.
There's not many lyrics. The lyrics that are there is just like a paragraph about talking about not being afraid to die. The Great Gig in the Sky, obviously referring to some kind of afterlife or death. But it is like a really, really, really cool piano ballad that it's another one of these tracks that like sometimes you listen to something like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example, but they're like, you can listen to a lot of 70s radio and you're like, oh, that sounds kind of crappy now. Like we do so many things different and like the style's changed and like also that sounds cheesy. But then sometimes you hear a song like Don't Stop Believing by Journey and you're like, oh, okay, some of the mastering of this track sounds a little bit old school, but like this track holds up today. This Great Gig in the Sky is just a great piano ballad, where of course some of the like vocal mastering sounds a little old, but like when I listened to this album the final time as I was making my notes, just click off the lights, close your eyes, and listen to it, and I was like, I can really feel that. I really liked this track.
Yeah, this track definitely has amazing vocals by Claire Troy.
It's like soulful.
I can read words.
like soulful
Yeah,
choir
yeah.
singing
It's like
that's
this really
constantly
kind of sad, very emotional vocal piece, like that runs like the vast majority of the song. All of the lyrics are like spoken. Yeah, as you said, they were talking about this guy kind of not really being afraid of dying, but
yeah, it like
yeah.
kicks in and then like she gets a little crazier and it's a little bit like wild and then like as the music slows she gets like a little bit more gentle and the notes are like less erratic, like not erratic, and then like it builds up, like it's just the feel of the track goes so many different places in this 4 minute track, 4 minute 43-second track, then like tons of songs will go like in like tons of artists will go in an album. This place, like, it's just it fluctuates so much in an awesome way.
Mhm.
The next song is called Money, and I believe that this is one of the singles. I
Mhm.
forgot to look up the singles again. Do you have that there?
It was Money and Time. So
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure.
the
So what do
other
you have for Money?
yeah, so this one is it's about money and kind of how it plays out and kind of making men, like greedy and egotistic and corrupt, and it kind of has like all these lyrics that are kind of like paranoid about how uh, people are going to take away the money, and the hostility and loneliness that comes with being giant rock stars that these guys are, within the um, what's the word, in the theme of money and how um, I still don't know the word. Anyways, yeah.
It's like a peppier, happier song that's a little bit sarcastic, where they're talking about how great money is, but then also like describing how, like you mentioned, like greed and like storing up this money. And they're like, well, money is like super good, and you say that you should get it, but then you never want to give it away to anybody because you just want to hoard it.
Yeah, and it kind of also comes back to this overrunning fact about the good versus evil, and money is a good thing. Like, I'll find the line, but yeah, money is a good thing, but then we let it corrupt us and make us paranoid and cause a whole bunch of problems with it, and it's eventually we come to this dark side of money.
Yeah, while you're looking that up, this is the first track, I believe, to implement a saxophone. And man, is it like a cool thing when that thing starts up and you're like, huh? Oh, that's totally cool. That was a sound I wasn't fully expecting. And like, of course, it's got like reverb on the saxophone, which is special and cool.
All right, the line is money, so they say it's the root of all evil today. But if you ask for a rise, which is apparently British for raise,
I
there
was
is
wondering
no
if that was what that
surprise.
was.
Yeah, it's no surprise that, dang it, I lost it. That they're giving none away. So yeah, they're talking about like kind of these tropes about how people say tropes about money, like I don't know, sharing is caring. That's a kind of a weak one, but like all these things that people will say. But then when it comes to like their own money, they don't actually, or the line, the money is the root of all evil. But then when you ask your boss for a raise, he's not going to give you a raise because he wants his own money. But if it's evil, then why do you want it? This is also kind of notable, but this song is written in 7/4 time, which
It's a weird feel. Like, it's super strange.
Yeah, and if the time signature apparently changes in between the sax, right after the saxophone solo, there's a guitar solo, and it changes back to I think 4/4 or something like that. But yeah, it gets this really kind of funky, swagger to the song, which is really cool.
Yeah. The next song is called Us and Them, and I think that Us and Them is my favorite track on the album.
Mm-hmm.
It is like a lot of people just say that it's an anti-war song, which it is an anti-war song, but it's also more about the human nature of like selfishness and greed and like the things that lead to classism and war. Like it's not just war, it's all of the things that lead up to violence and greed and the fighting of humankind. It is like musically so like smooth. I wrote organ chording opening, guitar arpeggiation leading to dissonant chords, then back to peaceful. I enter the smooth horn, and like it is so smooth, like jazzy smooth. And then I wrote beautiful, smooth song pointing out the futility of human nature's propensity to violence, warfare, and selfishness. Dang that horn. The choral arrangement with the organ during the buildup is so effective. Like, it is just musically this 7-minute and 49-second, like, just jazzy soul song that is on a quote-unquote, like, prog rock album. And it's just so good. Like, I would stop this podcast right now just so I could listen to it. I really like it. You got anything on that one?
I think you pretty well covered it. It's this humanistic look upon war and kind of asking the question, why are we really fighting? There was something I was going to say about the music, but I forgot. Oh, well.
Okay, it flows right into the next song, which is called Any Color You Like, which is an all-instrumental track. It's got synth. It's mostly synth, I think. I can't remember. Mostly synth, a bunch of reverb, a little bit of like... I believe this is the one that they said... I read, like... live they do a lot of scatting, and it could go up to like 15 minutes.
Yeah,
and like it's just kind of almost like an ad
freestyle jam session type thing in the middle of their concert,
which that's tough.
Yeah. I remember what I was going to say on the last track. The spacing also between the lyrics is really effective. They have like a reverberation of the lyrics that just kind of plays into its smoothness, almost like an instrument.
Yeah, they repeat a word and it reverbs on the beat, like as almost like a metronome or something for a lot of those lines. The next song is called Brain Damage, which I want to hear your take on the song, and then I'll give my take on the song, and we'll see if they're even close.
All right. So from what I saw, this is a song written from the perspective of the writer Roger. That's not it. Walters. I can't remember his first name. Anyways, it's kind of talking, at least how I see it. It's from the perspective of him as like a person with schizophrenia and having these voices, or he calls them lunatics, in his head that kind of talk to him, and how the world perceives that as kind of in a confused manner. He talks about what's the operation where they remove the frontal lobe.
Lobotomy?
Yeah, which I don't think they do that anymore. But yeah, he kind of touches on that. The line is, "You raise the blade, you make the change, you rearrange me until I'm sane. You lock the door and throw away the key. There's someone in my head, but it's not me." So he's talking about our misunderstanding of mental illnesses in especially the more quote unquote official realm of like these experts don't even know what they're doing, and it's not really good for anyone. And then at the end of the chorus, he brings in the line, "I'll see you on the dark side of the moon," which in the beginning of the chorus, he kind of uses to relate how there are these dark things in life, and this is kind of where the album starts to come together. There are these dark things in life, like, you know, our mental illnesses, or our money, or war, or drugs, and any color you like. There was some who speculated it being the song. You know, every song was supposed to kind of have this underlying theme of, which are, you know, some are more obvious. For example, money is about money and time is about time. So they were kind of talking about, there were some interpretations that would say that Any Color You Like, the instrumental track, depicted like an acid trip, and how drugs play into life, and or there were other interpretations which were talking about like consumerism, and how, like, you know, you can have anything as long as it's you know, this one thing that we've actually chosen. We're just giving you a false representation of choice and willingness. But yeah, he kind of unites the entire album with the listeners, kind of calling them to meet at the dark side of the moon, which is all of these, the dark sides of everything that just kind of come together, and it wraps up better in the next track. But this is also kind of a song about, you mentioned him earlier, Syd Barrett, who was the creative drive behind Pink Floyd before this album, and how he battled with, I can't remember, mental illnesses of some kinds.
He battled mental illnesses that seemed that they were related to his addiction to LSD, which he tried shortly. I don't remember when he tried it, but he tried it. He got addicted and he went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so the things that I kind of pulled out of this was mostly a metaphor for someone like Syd Barrett. You mentioned there's a light side and a dark side to these tracks. It almost seemed to me like this was a more allegorical song, where it was talking about like people like Syd that are a little bit crazy. Like, it's a concept I've mentioned before. I don't know if we've talked about it on the show. Like, a lot of times the most creative people are a little bit insane, and people think they're crazy. And it seems like this is almost a track talking about maybe the way that people looked at Syd, where they wanted to change him because he was so weird, but that creativity was like a good thing. They tried to stop him, though, because he was crazy. Like, that would be the light side and the dark side. Like, the creativity is different, but whenever people see something different, they you know, try to change them, try to change their mind. You mentioned the lobotomy. Nobody can understand them. The end of the track is like the crazy voice that's kind of throughout the album saying, I can't think of anything to say except I think it's marvelous, and then a bunch of crazy laughing. Like, that's kind of the allegory for that track, kind of the way I see it. It fits with the theme that you mentioned.
Yeah. Something I found while researching this track, they were talking about Syd Barrett and like their band meetings, I guess, with him, and apparently, like, he was a crazy person, and like, there was apparently this one time where he pitched this song called "Have You Got It Yet?" and essentially the song, he would play through it and show it to him, and then they would try to play through it, and he's like, no, no, no. So we'd play through it again, and he would change something like really subtly, and they could never get it. And
he just kept changing it constantly.
He just kept changing the song, which I thought was kind of cool. It kind of shows, the mad sense of humor that he had, but that really, like, I don't know. I don't think a sane person would actually do that.
Yeah. So it
really spurs creativity.
This is unrelated to his insanity, but also just a great story. So if what I read on Wikipedia was correct, the way that he kind of officially was not like included in the band was they were literally like packing up to do a gig one night, and one of them was like, so like, shouldn't we go pick up Sid? And then they were like, no. And then they just didn't. They left and went without him. And then they just like stopped including him, and they wanted to kind of do a thing where they used him on the albums, but they didn't tour with him because he was a crazy like drug addict. Like he had been like,
yeah, he wasn't stable,
like pantomiming, and like evidently he would just like stand on the stage and play like one chord the entire time and never actually change, or just like pantomime the entire show and not actually sing or play, just like fake it. And so like they wanted to try to keep him for the albums because he was creative, but he was also crazy, and it just didn't work out. So they eventually replaced him. Just weird. Oh my goodness, gotta readjust. The last song on the album is called Eclipse. What do you have for that?
All right, so this track, like I was saying in the previous song, this is the one that really kind of ties everything together. It talks about, let me pull up the lyrics. It says, all that you touch, see, taste, feel, love, hate, distrust, save, give, deal, but beg, borrow, or steal, all that you create, destroy, all that you do, say, eat, and everyone you meet, all that is in your sight, everyone you fight, and all that is now, and all that is gone, and all that is to come, and everything under the sun is in tune, but it is all eclipsed by the dark. But the sun is eclipsed by the moon. So it's kind of relating this to not just the things of the album, but like literally everything. Everything has this good side, but then ultimately there is an even darker side that is being eclipsed by the moon. And at the very end of the track, there's another another part where it's just spoken, the lyrics. There's no dark side of the moon, really. In fact, it is all dark. So everything is in this really dark state, which, as mentioned in the track before, is this kind of common ground that we share with everyone.
It's both scientifically correct, considering that the moon is just a reflection of the sun, and theologically correct in that it is attempting to describe the depravity of man. I'm sure that's what they were going for, theological correctness.
Yeah, because they weren't humanists. From the
so
60s.
Or like nihilists or something like crazy. I don't know. But yeah, that wraps up the album. That is the entirety of the album. It's I think 40 something minutes.
Oh,
42 minutes.
And just to mention, this ends similar to The Wall, where we have again this closing heartbeat, which we opened with, to kind of loop it back into this semi-cylindrical cycle of darkness.
Yeah, and if you have a record player that happens to flip your record over, it could just do it perpetually and it would constantly flow.
Mm-hmm. I guess what you could do is like get 2 record players and 2 discs, I guess you would need, yeah. So you could do it, have one record player play solely side A, and then just have it, perfectly timed. So you flip one off and turn one on at the same time, so that it, seamlessly flows. You could do that, I guess.
Or I guess you could just put a CD on repeat.
I guess
who does that?
Who listens to CDs anymore?
I mean, you can put Spotify on repeat and pay for Spotify.
Pay for premium.
Yeah, I pay for premium anyway, so I didn't run it. Man, if I did not pay for premium and I was trying to listen to something like this, and I got like
it was
a
annoying.
stupid ad for a country song,
like,
man, I would go crazy.
Yeah, generally I listen to it on my Microsoft Zune, in my car.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that still exists, and you still have a working one.
It doesn't still exist. I have the sole Microsoft Zune, the last one on the planet, essentially.
I have a working one, but it's only an 8 gig model. Like my 30 gig broke.
I have a 32 and a 16 that are still
Nice.
functional. My 32 has a broken screen, but I don't care because I can't live on 16 gigs of memory. That's way too little.
Yeah, my entire way that I consume music changed once I no longer had a dedicated MP3 player and was using my phone. Now I just make playlists that are constantly changing, and then I make 50 million playlists and like constantly swap which ones are downloaded to my phone and which ones aren't. And so I end up listening to more new music, which is good, but also I forget some of the music that I really like, which is lame. But yeah, we already talked about that. Wraps up the album.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go into our normal stuff, I guess, which outside of The Dark Side of the Moon, is there anything that you want to talk about that you've been listening to this last week?
Yes, there is. This past week, I went over to my local thrift store, as I was telling you earlier this week, and I picked up a few CDs. One of them is the self-titled album Smash Mouth by Smash Mouth.
Nice.
Which is actually, there are a whole bunch of solid tracks on this one. Holiday in My Head, Pacific Coast Party. I really like that one. I've been jamming out to that one in the car. And then this is the one that also has their cover of I'm a Believer on it. So that's what I've been listening to. I also got Stunt by the Bare Naked Ladies, which I listened to through like once or twice. It's all right. Not my favorite.
What type of music is that?
Bare Naked Ladies. They're like 90s, late 90s indie alternative rock.
Okay.
It's kind of. Do you know what the presidents of the United States of America sound like?
No.
All right. Well, they sound kind of like
but
that.
I mean, if you say like indie rock, I kind of know what that. It's weird because unlike
it's like old
anything else
indie rock
that I can think of. Okay.
Like not modern indie rock. The indie rock genre has kind of changed a lot lately.
Like that's a weird thing though. Like the fact like indie normally is a state of like publishing or a state of like financial stability, but in music, indie is a sound. Like it's a genre of like if I say indie,
it's not like folky.
Like modern indie, yeah. Well, yeah. There's that too. But like, there's a bunch of albums that if I said modern like indie alt rock, you would know exactly what I mean. Even though for anything else, like if I said an indie video game or an indie movie, that could mean anything. But when I say indie alt rock, you know exactly what sound I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's super weird.
Also, I was telling you about this earlier, at least about part of it. I picked up a copy of Backyard Skateboarding, which I've been playing through, and it has under the character tab you can customize the soundtrack. So there was this, I think it was called like reggae or something, but it was like this really weird like generic ska type soundtrack that was it was only like I would say like 6 or 7 tracks long, but it was pretty cool.
Was it like licensed music?
No, it was just like There were like no lyrics or anything, but it was still pretty cool.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was funny.
I've been listening to a bunch of weird stuff. I talked about, the pop punk that I listened to last week.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness, I'm having a little bit of weird things going on right now. But I don't want to talk about that again. Instead, I will talk about something which there's a video game that came out this year that I'm a huge fan of. It is a sort of indie game called Life is Strange. And the soundtrack for that is all licensed music, and like a lot of it's weird alt indie stuff, I guess. And if you just Google this is a playlist I'm promoting that is not my own. If you just Google Life is Strange soundtrack on Spotify, if you Google it on Spotify, that's just become part of our vernacular now. When you say search, it means Google. If you search for it on Spotify, you'll find the one that I follow is by Lily Talent. And it is just all of the music from that game, at least so far. I don't think they add new music with each episode. There's going to be 5 episodes. There's 4 out right now. I really, really, really like that playlist. Super chill, super, I don't know, like whatever. It's a little hipstery sounding because it's got the weird alt indie feel. But I really, really like it, especially the song Santa Monica Dream is probably one of my favorite songs on that playlist. And I think that about wraps it. Oh, next week. So we do this every week. Next week, we have decided on the album We Can't Dance by the band Genesis that came out in 1991. I am a huge lover of Phil Collins music, but I don't really know very much Genesis music. But I know I love the song I Can't Dance, which is on that album. So I'm hoping it's getting late. I'm hoping that the rest of the album is as good as that song because it's really good and Phil Collins is tight. Do you what is your experience with the Phil Collins stuff? Like, do you know a lot of his like popular pop songs?
Pretty much just the Tarzan soundtrack.
Okay.
So yeah, not very much.
If you are bored, I would suggest listening to whatever his greatest hits CDs are. I haven't listened to a lot of his actual albums, but if you just listen to his greatest hits, it's tons of sweet adult contemporary pop songs, if that's a genre that you're at least interested in at all. But yeah, so we'll do the normal thing. Outside of this podcast, how can people kind of find out what you're up to? They can't. As is the theme or the running thing. Here's the thing. You do shows on this network, and also you have a huge Spotify playlist. So you want to find out what Blake is doing, you could just look for him on Spotify, Blake Wilson, and he makes a playlist that has every song he likes. I found that I haven't been adding too much stuff to that playlist because I haven't been listening to it as much since the Discover playlist came out. So that's generally what I listen to a lot. I made that public, so if you want to check that out, you can check that out. But yeah, I try to add a couple tracks every once in a while to that playlist. Yeah, also speaking of the Discover playlist, mine is also public now, and also it was great this week. I guess by the time you hear this podcast, it will have switched. I haven't checked mine out yet this week. Mine was all right. It was killer. So cool. You can find me at twitter.com/MichaelNipp, MichaelKnipp, or facebook.com/TheRealMichaelNipp. If you want to email us questions or comments about something that we talked about, or suggestions for albums to listen to in the future, you can email us at podcast@theculturemypeople.com, and I'll make sure that Blake gets that. I'll read it. And it's awesome. There's an audio version of this podcast. I like to talk about that because in the audio version of this podcast, which you can find at theculturemypeople.com, or you can search for us on iTunes or something, we're in the main iTunes database, which means we're on a lot of those databases. I actually edit in clips of all of the songs that we talk about, so you can kind of get samples for what it sounds like and what we mean when we say what we do, or stumble over what we meant to say. I'm going to sneeze. Hold on. No, false alarm. So the audio version of this podcast, I actually find really cool. Like we have a live version of this that we do where you can listen to the chat, but then even if you heard it, it's sometimes worth, I think, listening to either the audio version or just listening to the album that we talked about, because I tend to be like, I really like a lot of the stuff that we talk about. So I recommend that you listen to it, especially this album.
I have one more question for you. Now that we have listened to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, are you going to drive on down to your local Walmart and hash out the $10 for the Walmart Pink Floyd t-shirt?
Okay. So ever since listening to The Wall, has been driving me nuts, because I was like, there is no way, no matter how good Dark Side of the Moon is, that it eclipses The Wall so much that there should be no Wall merchandise. Mm-hmm. After having listened to The Dark Side of the Moon, it's a super rad album. If someone were to give me that shirt, I would totally wear it, even though I've been mad at everyone else for wearing it. But I would be more likely to look up a t-shirt of The Wall or something and order it and make it myself, because I still think that I prefer that album. But I have changed my mind. If someone is wearing a Pink Floyd The Dark Side of the Moon t-shirt, I will walk up to them and make a comment about the album. And then if they respond in a way that, like, I know that they... if they respond in a way that is obvious that they've listened to the album, then I'll be like, oh, that's cool, man. If they respond in a way that is obvious that they just want to be cool hipsters, I'll just slap them in the face.
Yeah, I am with you in that I do enjoy The Wall more better. I enjoy The Wall more, and I'm not going to go out and buy a Pink Floyd shirt, with the reason, well, some of the reason being because of, all of the hipsters who wear it to be cool. I don't want to.
There is
because I'm a hipster as well.
There's no way on earth all of the people out there that are wearing Pink Floyd shirts actually have listened to this album even enough to, like, recognize a song from the middle of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Which I guess that's just annoying. Whatever. You just wear it to be cool, but I'm gonna. I got in this podcast before I, like, eventually sneeze and, like, shoot snot all over my mic. Sorry, it's a little graphic. Before I Can't Know Music on the Music episode 10, this has been me, Michael Nip, and my co-host
Blake Wilson.